It's a mess. We have a lot of doers, but not enough thinkers. We need people who will take charge, see the way to growth, understand the tools, and how to support our rapid evolution. I don't understand who we need. And when I hire, it seems like we're never hitting the mark. Not because the employee isn't great, but just because they don't have that oomph, that X factor that's helping move the proverbial needle. I'm really not sure what to do. Does that sound familiar? Well, let me tell you, you are not alone. Building the right team structure so that you can scale is critical. So we're going to talk about it today. Welcome to Manage Chaos Podcast, where we give you the startup business rundown in less time than it takes for you to get to work. I'm Katrina Purcell.
And I'm Rachel Anderson.
And today we're going to set our businesses up for success by understanding how to build the right team structure for scaling. I've lost count on how many episodes where we've talked about teams and building teams and how motivating teams. But I think it is one of the key parts of a startup or any business really is the people who make things happen. And so today, what is the first step that leaders really need to take in order to think about building a team structure that can scale? So not just for the now, but for the future.
The best way to start with really looking at scaling is to take inventory of right now. Then take inventory of what you want it to be in your future state. That's the simplest way to start. What's the reality, not the idea of what you have or where you're at or the people as your team is growing. And then what do you need in the future to achieve your goals? So really, I like to call this organizational road mapping. Like you do this in your business, you do this with your products, where you make these roadmaps to make sure that you can hit fiscal goals, that you can develop a product that has all the features and the paid avenues within them, services, whatever, so that you can actually get paid with your customers. But we don't do this as much with our actual people. And I think that it's a really smart thing to do when you're looking at trying to be really smart about growth, especially as a startup where things are less defined and it might feel overwhelming to understand what all the different kinds of possible roles could be in a fully thriving enterprise. And so that's really where you want to start with your organizational road mapping. Now, I know this seems overwhelming even to think about, like, I don't know what I need in my future state. And so you really, as a leader, need to get clarity on exactly what you're going to do in order to get the growth you want. And you can start anywhere for that. A lot of businesses start with their current sales projections, the current product, the current revenue, and then think out, okay, so if our goals this year is to add 10%, that's a 1-year plan, 10% on all factors. And in 2 years, we want to be at 15%. And in 3 years, what does that look like, right? I like 3 years personally when I do this kind of planning because I feel like it's far enough that it stretches you, but it's not so far that it feels unattainable or that time would just overhaul those plans by the nature of being too far out. And so I wouldn't really recognize or recommend, I should say, more than 3 years, but do it for whatever you want. It could even be a quarter, honestly. Maybe this is a good opening exercise for you to just say 1 quarter from now, what is the growth we expect? And what does that mean for our teams and for our people? And then think really clearly about what gets you there. Is it a person? Is it a program? Is it a technology? Is it a time? Is it an effort? Is it a type of task? Because that should allow you to then decide what kind of people it takes to accomplish those things. So really, you should map what it takes in this holistic view, what your future team looks like in order to accomplish these scaling plans. And honestly, I had to do this myself once. I was working for a brand new startup. We had 4 people on board, and the VC, the investor, said, I want a 3-year growth plan. I want a projection. And so I had to sit down and I took all of those sales projections that the sales leader was putting together for a 3-year scale. I matched it up to marketing and I said, okay, if sales is going to hit this, what does marketing need to do in order to enable the sales team to hit these goals? And I also had to put a financial projection together for 3 years of how we were going to scale that organization to hit the aggressive revenue goals that were projected. And then I had to say, okay, well, if this is true, seeing that, in the first year, we're going to go all paid media. And the second year, we're going to start having enough momentum that we can do organic. And then in the third year, you have this next part that kind of kicks in with partnerships. Then these are the kinds of people we have to hire in the same sort of time frame in order to manage those things and help us understand how to do it. And that really can help define your organizational goals in general, and then scaling that back into people goals specifically.
And I think it's easier to do in functions that are more directly related to those financial targets. And so where it gets tricky is product and engineering teams. And in the past, where I've been able to sort of figure that out is you start to think about how many customers does that revenue really equal, and how many of these customers may want product enhancements, or do we expect we're going to have some tech debt that's going to need to be fixed? How are we going to want to organize our engineering team? Are we going to co-locate in different regions? Are we going to have scrum teams that are on specific things? And starting to think about what that organization also looks like as it scales in support of those targets and really the customer retention, right? Because that's really, product and engineering is going to be directly related to the retention of those customers when you start to think about making sure the product is delivering for them. And so starting to put that into your plan as well as you think about those financial targets. But how do leaders know that when they hire, they're going to get that person they really need in the role? So, maybe they know they need someone for marketing, but do they need a CMO? Do they need a VP of marketing? Like, how do they know? What does that end up looking like?
Yeah. I think that this is such a funny story. I guess it was maybe a year ago now, I was talking to a brand new executive sales leader. Now, brand new meaning to this organization, like he had just gotten promoted into that, but he had been doing sales executive function for years at this point. And he, on our first call together to talk about, what their marketing needs were, because he had just taken on the marketing team as part of his new, promotion. He told me that he had just learned that there were actually 3 different types of marketers, not just one. And that was like really big news to him. And I won't say who it is because I just thought it was hilarious and precious, because I was like, actually there's 4. And also that's just like general buckets. There's probably dozens and dozens of like actual roles and specific kind of people that have skills for specific kinds of things. And you're going to see that in every department. Every product person doesn't have the same expertise. Every security person doesn't have the same kind of expertise. Someone who, even IT, like the person who lays down the infrastructure of the wires into a building is an IT person. The person who configures the data center itself and makes sure that that is protected as part of the organizational function, that's an IT person. The person who actually comes to your desk and is like, I can help you log on, which is what I often need them to come and help me do, that's also an IT person. So we all have these like multiple types of roles that all get like kind of smushed together when you don't really understand what it is that role or function does, which I'm going to say for business leaders, that's normal. You cannot possibly know everything about everything. So what you need to do is get clarity. Clarity is going to be key. And I feel like we always say this, that clarity is like the big thing when you're really trying to figure out something you don't understand or do something new or grow or whatever. And so I don't mean to sound just like, oh, it's easy, it's clarity. But you need to get crystal clear on your job requirements. And that does not mean title. That means what specific function, tasks, what are the specific tasks that you need that person to complete in order to do whatever the goal is. And the goal is not like, build a product. The goal is like, I need someone who can actually build me the feature of compiling all this data together and saying what's missing. So what is the actual tasks that an employee will need to do in order to build that thing? And if you don't know, that's okay. Just go ask or use our friend Googly or do something, Mr. AI out there, like whatever you need to do to figure out what are those tasks. Then say, what is the largest percentage of these tasks rolled into one job? Because the truth is that sometimes we need multiple different functions in order to accomplish one thing, like a campaign. You need someone who's going to monitor the thing that you put into the world. You need someone who's going to create the ad. You need someone who's going to do the copy. You need someone who's going to be able to like understand the medium that it goes to. And someone who understands billboards versus somebody who understands Meta very different people. So, sometimes you have to say, okay, 75% of all the tasks I need are this kind of a title, and I'm going to ask a contractor to do these other things, or whatever that looks like. Maybe it's 2 people. Maybe you need to hire 2 people for accomplishing the goal rather than one thing. But all of that has to be done once you get clarity on what you actually need them to do in order to accomplish the goal. And so you're no longer really going to be a business leader who thinks a person can be a generalist and do everything, because I'm empowering you to decide right now that you can get specific. It's within your power. You can get that clarity. So that's really where I would say is like the next key thing.
I agree. It's definitely one of those things that is tricky, right? Because you think to yourself, well, I'm getting more bang for my buck with a generalist. But in reality, when you get someone who's really niched down into specific things that you need, they can do things faster. They can get better results, and yes, they can't do everything. But as you grow, you don't want everyone doing everything. You want someone who's specialized and knows what they're doing to be doing it. We've talked a lot.
Well, before we move on, I think you're keying into something, and I want us to tap in just a little bit further, which is sometimes in startups, you can in fact win with a generalist. Sure. But do that in a moment of time where you just need someone to be scrappy for a while, to do a bunch of things, and they have signed up for that. You do not hire a specialist to do a generalist's job. Hire a generalist to just keep you afloat in the thing until you realize that that's not sufficient, and then go hire a real expert to do it, because the bang for your buck, I guarantee you, it'll be worth it.
Right. So we talked a lot about culture across other episodes as well, but should they be hiring for culture fit? Should they only be looking for a role fit? In these early stages, do they even know what their culture is? And how are they sort of making sure that these people they're bringing on are aligned?
Oh man, I see this all the time. First of all, if you don't know if you have a culture, I will guarantee you 100% bets down, you have one. You just have given up the right to define it. Because whether or not you have actively chosen what your culture is, there is one in your workplace. So I'm going to start there. And truthfully, as you scale, culture can't be a negotiable thing. It has to exist. And like I said, it's just going to be a matter of, have I chosen what that culture looks like? Or have I allowed all the people I've hired in totality to choose for themselves? Therefore, it is going to be a thing, but somebody else has defined that thing. So really, when you start to hire, don't feel pressure and start to hire based on urgency. I think that that's one of the things that leaders feel a lot of the time when they hire, especially as they're trying to scale and keep up with the rapid growth that's happening within their businesses. And that's not to say to hire slowly, but that's to say, don't let the sense of urgency dictate who you're hiring, because in the long run, you will spend more money on a bad hire by having to fire them, replace them, recruit for them, train them, and then get somebody who's back up to speed. I mean, I can do the math for you, but I'll refrain. So it can be, though, like thousands and thousands of dollars that you're messing up with. So don't give in to the urgency. If you are someone who, wants to build a strong culture, and that can be a culture of getting stuff done, or just being on time, or of working above and beyond. It doesn't have to be something that's more on the emotional scale, which is usually what I think some leaders think about when they're like, culture. Oh, we want somebody that feels loved and adored. And like, no, you can have practical things part of your culture too. Just as a side note, I don't think that other thing is bad. I think both things can exist. We are complex here. We can do all the things. So as you look at your culture, you must hire for those parts as much as the skill. Because the truth is that there are thousands and thousands of people in this world that can do the same things. I do not know one person who is the only person in the whole wide world who can accomplish one thing. So if you have all of this variety, it can be equally prioritized for you to find someone who will uphold the culture you want and believe in as part of that hiring process. And so almost any skill in a business, within reason, I'm going to say, but like almost any skill in business that I've worked at can be taught. Now, yes, there's doctors and other things. So like, let's not get crazy at all the caveats to that statement, but like any sales function can be taught. Most product stuff can be taught. Maybe it takes more time, more effort, but it can be taught. finances can be taught, right? So all these things can be taught. So if you think about prioritizing culture as equally important to skill, then if you find someone who's an incredible culture fit and they have 80% of the skills you want them to have, 60% of the skills you want them to have, you pick the percentage, then just think of that remaining percentage as the teachable portion that you get as a manager or leader to imbue into this employee. That's their growth opportunity. That means they stay longer at your company. That means they get to have experiences that they value. And that can be a whole different part of a really strong culture. So honestly, culture is the hardest thing for you to teach because it means it's a change in the chemistry of the brain of the person. It means that the behavior of the individual has to change. And so if you haven't picked up on all the things that I've just said, I'm going to just say it again. Definitely building a scaling team is part of making sure that your business is also prioritizing the culture that you want it to scale into.
And I think a lot of that comes back to actually documenting the culture, which we've talked about on another episode. So making sure that you understand even what the culture is and that it's easily transferable to other people. And then just a small caveat, I think, you also want people who are additive to your culture. So they need to fit, certain aspects of it, but they don't need to look and sound like everyone else on your team. That's not culture fit. So just so we can create some clarity there. So
Agreed.
That is a wrap on this episode of the Manage Chaos podcast. Thank you so much for joining us. You can follow and subscribe on YouTube to help us hit our very aggressive goal of 5,000 followers by the end of this year. You can also follow or subscribe on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, and we will talk to you on the next episode of the Manage Chaos podcast. Did you hear? Rachel and I are going to be at South by Southwest. We are hosting a workshop for startup leaders just like you, and this is one of the 3 topics that we're going to deep dive. We'll be hearing real-life case studies, exploring templates and tools, and having peer collaborations, taking your questions for live consulting. We'd love to see you there. Can't attend? Follow us on YouTube and Instagram at the Managed Chaos Podcast to see our behind-the-scenes look at South by Southwest and a special live episode recorded right in the heart of Austin. We'll have to find the heart first. Check out our other 2 episode previews on South by Southwest to hear more about what you can expect.